look for common ground.
Russia slams as food terrorism what seems to be the deliberate destruction of more than 50,000 tons of grain by Ukrainian troops. That comes amid a worsening global food crisis. That's as the UN admits that there's no proof to Western claims that Moscow is plundering Ukraine's grain and shipping it to its own buyers. This, however, does not stop Washington from reportedly warning African countries against buying Russian supplies amid the food deficit. The Arctic crew finds documents saying Ukrainian neo-Nazi battalion fighters were mining civilian areas in the Donbass in 2016, with the OSCE aware of this information. Our correspondent sees the evidence for himself.
Right sector militants, again, one of the most notorious neo-Nazi formations in Ukraine, they shared this building with the members of the OSCE mission. We found their insignia on the floor just above us.
And the Chilean president has slammed a U.S. move to exclude countries from a regional meeting as a mistake after Washington provoked massive backlash among Latin American leaders by not inviting some key states. Broadcasting from our studios in Moscow, this is RT International. I'm Sean Thomas, certainly glad to have you with us. Right now, an act of food terrorism against its own people. Moscow claims Ukrainian troops set a large grain warehouse ablaze in Mariupol's seaport as they left the city, leaving more than 50,000 tons of grain destroyed amid a raging global food crisis. Russia says the incident clearly shows the true nature of Ukrainian political elites.
This crime against humanity demonstrates to the entire world community the true face of the Kiev regime, which, in fact, uses the methods of food terrorism against its own people. All this is happening with the full support of countries of the so-called civilized West, and amid the ongoing hysteria based on false accusations that the Russian Federation is creating a global food crisis.
Moscow has warned the situation could get even worse, as the supply problem has not stopped Kiev deploying troops and armored vehicles at several grain stores in Kharkov and Sumy along the areas of the Donetsk People's Republic it still controls. Meanwhile, Kiev insists Russia has plundered at least 400,000 tons of grains and shipped it to its own buyers. The UN Secretary General has, however, admitted that there is no proof to back up such allegations.
Is the UN aware of such conduct from of Russia and Ukraine?
We've seen, there was recent media reports. We were talking to our colleagues at WFP, who would be in the lead. They have no way of verifying these allegations.
Reports show that this has not stopped the U.S. from sending warnings to African countries to prevent them from buying wheat allegedly, quote, stolen by Russia. That's as Africa struggles with a severe food shortage, putting the continent on the brink of famine. More than 14 million people in just 3 East African countries are on the verge of starvation, with half of them children, this according to International Rescue Committee. The organization warns that this number will only rise by 6 million more people if prices for grain continue to mount. A member of the Africa Humanitarian Action Organization says that there is no reason to follow Washington's orders if doing so could exacerbate the continent's hunger crisis.
I don't think it's appropriate for anybody to tell Africans not to buy from anywhere when millions are starving. And therefore, it's very important that we get the food as soon as possible before people start dying. And it's very important that most African countries, including South Africa, question the issue of why they should support any initiative from any other side. Africa is an unaligned continent, and therefore it's very important that Africa keeps its trade routes open with any country in the world. This is a very important source for Africa because we have a lot of poor people here. We have climate change that's impacting on people's lives. And now we have a major drought now happening in many parts of Africa. Simply, we cannot make the people of Africa homes in this great war that's happening between superpowers.
Ensuring the safe export of grain from Ukraine is among the key issues up for discussion in a meeting between the Russian and Turkish foreign ministers in Ankara this Wednesday. RT's Ilya Petrenko reports now from the Turkish capital.
The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is in the capital of Turkey, a very important country in the region, the nation with the longest Black Sea coastline. Ankara has managed to maintain close ties with both Kiev and Moscow, which explains how active Turkish officials have been in trying to become mediators in the conflict. Russia-Ukraine talks in Istanbul earlier in spring led to pretty much nothing, but Turkey could still help. Okay, if it's not in hammering out a ceasefire, it could be something else. Let me explain. Mr. Lavrov's visit comes at a time when Western nations are accusing Russia of sabotaging Ukrainian wheat exports through the port city of Odessa, where scores of vessels have been blocked for months. It's a critical issue for cash-strapped Ukraine. Well, the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, is blaming the logistical deadlock on Kiev, saying Ukraine shot itself in the foot by setting up mines in the waters around Odessa. He also says that the Russian Navy has nothing to do with the issue.
When it comes to Ukraine's export, we are not impeding it. There are a number of export routes. There are ports which are under Ukraine's control. There's more than Odessa and other adjacent ports in the Black Sea. It's not us laying mines in the ports, it's Ukraine. I've already proposed many times to demine them. We are ready to ensure security. We're not going to take advantage of the situation to launch attacks from the sea, so there are no problems regarding the export of grain there.
Last week, an important message came from the Turkish foreign minister, who admitted that Ukrainian mines were pretty much the key issue in this crisis. Something else that we heard from Foreign Minister Lavrov was that Russia sees Turkey's possible assistance in demining as a good thing, and Moscow is ready to get itself involved in that kind of joint work. There's another aspect in this crisis. An open sea route from Bosphorus to Odessa is something that could be used by Kiev to obtain Western military hardware. And this is something that Russia wouldn't accept under any circumstances. However, the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, says that the first step in solving this logistical crisis should be Ukraine receiving anti-ship systems. So for Kiev, it's weapons first, demining second.
We have reports from the ground on the Ukrainian conflict in Mariupol. In the Donetsk People's Republic, Russian rescue workers say that they are continuing to clear debris of destroyed residential buildings, extracting bodies from the rubble with special equipment provided by Moscow. Yesterday, Russian forces also said that they completed a demining operation in the city's port. And as the conflict continues, RT finds evidence that the OSCE may have been working alongside Ukraine's neo-Nazi battalion White Sector, members of the European Security Organization who allegedly shared a shelter with the far-right fighters, appeared to be privy to atrocities committed by the battalion's soldiers, but did not report on them. We have asked the OSCE for a comment on that, but are yet to receive a reply. RT's Igor Zhdanov sees the evidence for himself and has commentary.
This is where the militants of the White Sector Battalion were stationed, one of the most notorious neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine. This was their command center. You can see homes, cables, all of them, of course, were destroyed. But what is particularly interesting about this place is that the White Sector militants, again, one of the most notorious neo-Nazi formations in Ukraine, very much akin to Azov or Aida, for example, they shared this building with the members of the OSCE mission. We found their insignia on the floor just above us. So again, members of the international community, the OSCE, they owed the roof over their heads to neo-Nazis. They shared food with neo-Nazis. A very peculiar symbiosis. So here's what I was talking about, Ukrainian insignia right next to the insignia of the OSCE. These are Cyrillic letters, they're written in Russian. So everything points to the fact that the members of OSCE indeed shared this living space with the Ukrainian forces which were in part, well, with the right sector neo-Nazi battalion.
On this street, here, the right sector, led the defense. Was the right sector mixed up with NATO? Yes, NATO and the OSCE were present here because we found their leaflets everywhere, their maps, narcotics, and everything else.
And this is an internal report of OSCE dated 2016, detailing some very inhumane approach of the Ukrainian military towards civilians.
Since 2014, the Ukrainian armed forces have been occupying civilian houses in the area of Shorter Street. Booby traps and mines were also placed in this area, which have led to numerous civilian casualties. In May, several inhabitants of the village complained to the Special Monitoring Mission about the behaviour of Ukraine armed forces personnel stationed in the vicinity of Shorter Street, and reported that they had evicted one family from their home in order to occupy it. The soldiers were using aggressive watchdogs kept unleashed to prevent people from accessing the area. It was reported that 2 people had been bitten by the dogs.
And here's another report from a January 2017 that we discovered on the right sector base. A very interesting find, because here it has a paragraph, relationship with military and military occupation of civilian houses. Here it details that the Ukrainian armed forces indeed were occupying civilian houses and placing military vehicles between these houses. For example, here it reads, in August, the Special Monitoring Mission spoke with an interlocutor, which is basically a local, who showed his partially destroyed house. Shortly after, the Ukrainian military placed a tank in their backyard. So not only were they using civilian houses and evicting civilians, they also rigged them. Here's a picture taken by OSCE showing a booby trap.
While the world continues to focus on supposed Russian atrocities, memories of crimes committed by Ukrainian forces in the 8-year-long war in Donbass remain. Roman Kosovo visits a city where at least 15 people, including 3 children, died after shelling in 2014, allegedly by Kiev forces. You can watch this a little bit later in our program. The Chilean president has slammed a U.S. move to exclude Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba, previously targeted with U.S. sanctions, from the Summit of the Americas.
The U.S. move is reinforcing the position that these other countries take in their own countries. We think it's an error, a mistake, and we're going to say that during the summit.
Mexican and Guatemalan leaders refused to attend out of protest, while Argentina, Colombia, and Brazil are reportedly hesitant to come. Bolivia's president had previously said that he won't attend, and the leaders of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras are also not expected. Washington has stood by its decision and stressed that it expects the summit to still be successful. The meeting, taking place in Los Angeles, was planned to